So let's take another breath. And as we exhale, release, relax, sit into your chair and let it support you as the floor supports your chair and the earth supports the floor. And our only job right now is to be here. We acknowledge that we are quiet, calm, and at ease with ourselves, with our friends, in our world. There can be lots of hustle and bustle around us, and sometimes it can feel a little crazy. And all we need to do is come back to this center of knowing that in any moment we can be quiet, calm, at ease with ourselves and in our world. This morning we especially acknowledge those who have given service to their country and who have released their own lives in the process. We give thanks, we acknowledge, and we know that a way we can truly commemorate is to know that we are also moving forward. Being the highest and best that we can be and helping to create a country and a world that is the highest and best that it can be. So right now, we take a couple of minutes of silence to remember, to commemorate, and to know how we can take that experience and move forward. As we return our awareness to this place and time, we do so with a renewed knowing of who we are and what is ours to be and to do. For this and all else we give thanks, and so it is. Amen.
Amen.
My button.
Mm-hmm. It's in there.
A little deeper. Okay, so this morning, my talk has to do with a couple of things going on right now, right? There are a lot of graduations, there are college, university commencements, high school commencement, I think was just this past Friday, and tomorrow was Memorial Day. So they seem a little opposite in a way, and how can we bring both of these together? So the title of my talk is Commemorating as We Commence. Almost on cue this morning, Zoya said, what is Memorial Day anyway? So what Memorial Day is, it started, and maybe some of you remember this, I remember when it was called Decoration Day, okay? Because you went to decorate the graves of those past, okay? Now, this started post-Civil War, because people, lots of lives lost in the Civil War, north and south, everywhere, cities, towns, countryside, every hamlet had its lost and had its graves as a result of the Civil War. And people started noticing people weren't paying attention to these graves. They were just blank pieces of earth, or some weedy vine was overtaking it, or something was happening that really wasn't in honor. So women, families said, we need to do something about this. And they started going to graves and putting flowers on. And they started doing it in spring, because then you had wildflowers, right, that you could pick and collect and take to the graves. And I read one little story about in the southern hamlet, and one of the women went to decorate the graves of the Southern forces that had fell, and she noticed there were also Union graves in the same cemetery, and they were being left untouched. And she started decorating those as well. So there are these wonderful anecdotes about how Memorial Day started, and it started really from the hearts of people and their love and for one another, and kind of erasing those barriers and boundaries and saying, we need to remember everyone who fell in this tragic war. So 3 years after the Civil War ended in 1968, it then came to the head of a Union veterans organization, because it was happening already, right? And then a union, meaning North, that kind of union, veterans organization established Decoration Day for the nation to decorate the graves of the war dead with flowers. So people, you know, it's a wonderful example of a groundswell of people going, we're going to do this. And then a veterans organization saying, let's make it official and have it really happen across the country. Now, I was watching CBS Sunday Morning this morning thinking they might have some things about Memorial Day. They really didn't. They had one piece about veterans coming home with PTSD. This was actually a nice story, fits the contrast, Memorial Day and Veterans Day. Veterans Day was established to honor all veterans. And Memorial Day was really established, or Decoration Day, to honor those who fell, who died in wars. But the story on CBS Sunday Morning was about a woman who strived to get an opportunity for the current veterans who were coming home with PTSD and depression and these kinds of things to not be tried in a regular court of law and put in jail. And instead, she has had courts established in almost every state in the country that are veterans treatment courts. And they meet the judge by saluting one another. They, there was something else they did that was militaristic.
Well, they had a specific treatment protocol that
Yes.
they had to go through, and they had to follow up, just like you would in the military.
Yes, each one has a mentor to help them, and they sign an agreement that they will go through this treatment plan for a period of a year or 18 months or something like that. And when they complete it, their transgression is forgiven or the sentence is greatly reduced. So that was a nice thing to see people responding to this need in a way other than a traditional court system. The other thing they ran across the screen that I was heartened to see is that even though Memorial Day, and I saw this online too, Memorial Day now is seen at least as much for family picnics and celebration and sales, right? Who doesn't have a Memorial Day sale? But when they did a survey for CBS Sunday Morning, they found that 76% of respondents honored Memorial Day for it being Memorial Day. That's what they thought of. And there were very small percentages that thought of Memorial Day as a day for sales and picnics. So it's still being held in people's hearts in the way that it was established. And this was another really interesting thing I discovered, that on Memorial Day, the flag is raised to the top of the mast, and if you read my little description of my talk, you saw that, quickly, and then slowly lowered to half-mast until noon, at which point, I have it written there, solemnly lowered to half-staff where it remains until noon, and then it's brought up to full staff for the rest of the day, signifying moving forward. Now, isn't this beautiful?
Yes.
I never knew that. And I read this and went, it's obvious. Commemorating as we commence. It's right there in front of us. Raised to full staff for the afternoon to signify moving forward with whatever human losses we have had. What do they count for? They count for continuing to support justice, liberty, all of these things that we applaud, which we sometimes don't see, right? And it's our job to continue to support that in our little community, across the country, across the world, in whatever way that is for us to do that. So I love knowing this now about Memorial Day. I also read that there is, unfortunately, it's right in the middle of our car wash tomorrow. There was a presidential declaration a few years ago that at 3 p.m. there will be a moment of silence. Regardless of what time zone you're in, right? 3 p.m. in your time zone, a moment of silence in memory. So those are some things that we can know about what Memorial Day is. Now, I have a lot of quotes in my slides today, and every one of them is taken from this book. It just, as I started thinking about how am I going to connect commencement and commemorating, I went to this Eric Butterworth book, In the Flow of Life. So if you like what you're seeing this morning and hearing this morning, you might want to take a look at that little book. All that is required, he says, to experience the fullness of life is to let life express, to live in the consciousness of limitless life. The flow of life cannot be locked in between birth and death, but don't we do that?
Yes.
You know, every time someone in our life passes, it's like, it's over. It feels like it's over. And Eric Butterworth is like, no, it is not. There is a limitless flow of life, and each of us has our own piece of that flow. So here's my little metaphor, A to Z, right? And if we stick life in between there, it's a finite thing, right? The alphabet starts at A, our alphabet, ends at Z. That's it. Starts, ends. Then I saw these other bookends that I went, whoa, this is more like it, right? So we have the earth and all of its depth, right? We have trees, and we can envision this just moving off to the sides, right? And these bookends don't really end. They just keep coming out with plants and flowers and more trees. So if we can envision life as this limitless flow of which we are a part, it's very different than sandwiching it in between birth and death. Tunnels have light at both ends. Now, Eric Butterworth goes into a little piece where he says that, you know, sometimes we go into that tunnel of darkness. And when we lose someone, or we have a shift in our lives, something happens that we go, I'm not real crazy about this. We can wind up in that spot of darkness. And he says, there's value in that. There's value in knowing where you are and being where you are and acknowledging where you are. It's really like unity affirmations and denials, right? The denial is not saying it doesn't exist. The denial is saying it doesn't have power over me. So part of the denial is acknowledging that whatever that situation is exists. When I was in college and after college living in Minneapolis, St. Paul, I got into a habit of going down to my parents' house over Memorial Day weekend. They were in southwestern Minnesota. It was about 4 hour drive. And this was the ritual. Monday morning, we were in Tyler. We started in Lake Benton and drove to the cemetery there. And my dad had been in business in that corner of the state his entire life. So he knew a lot of people. So we'd circle around through the Lake Benton cemetery and he'd stop at a few graves. We'd continue on. We'd go south to Edgerton, where my dad's parents were buried. And I actually had an uncle who was killed in Korea. He was killed there the year I was born. And I've done some reading about since then, you know, kind of what happened in Korea. And so then we would go there and kind of honor those graves. And then we would typically meet up with another of his brothers, Garrett, and his wife Betty in Pipestone and have a late breakfast there. And then we would finish the circle around through Ruthton, where my mother's parents and a lot of people she knew and grew up with were buried. And then we would finish in Tyler. And we would walk through these cemeteries, right? And my mom would go, oh, I remember her. You know, she used to live across the road from us out on the farm. And my dad would go, I remember him. I built a house for him 15 years ago. And they would do this kind of commemorating sort of thing. So there's this acknowledging of people. There's acknowledging of passing. There's acknowledging of missing physical presence in our lives. Here's the catch. Don't Where's the rest of my quote?
Went into the tunnel.
Yeah, it's under the picture somewhere. Don't let the tunnel remain static. Don't let the tunnel experience, that's what it is, remain static. Because you know what a tunnel is like when it doesn't have a hole at the other end, a light at the other end. What is that?
It's a cave.
It's a cave. And that's what it looks like, right?
Right.
A tunnel without a light at the other end is a cave. And we don't need to stay there because we can remember there is a light at the other end, whatever that means for us.
God.
Butterworth is great with metaphor. So here's Butterworth. If you want to remain in the second grade all your life, you can. But eventually you will be bigger than the other children and even your desk won't fit you. Now, isn't that a great kind of grab by the collar sort of statement? You can stay where you are. You can stay in your cave. You can stay in your tunnel without a light at the other end. But it's not going to contain you. You're going to outgrow it and you're going to feel crunched in and you're going to want to break through and break out. All of life is best honored by us living life fully. So how do we connect commemorating and commencing? Exactly that way. All of life is best honored by each of us living life fully. Butterworth talks about, he said, you know, when each one of us pass, think about it yourself. Do you want people to be sad for the rest of their lives because you're not there?
No.
No. No. No. That's not what we want when we pass. So this is something we can take into our own lives, whether we lost someone in the military or some other way. We can bring this right back home. Their lives are best honored by us living life fully. So we can let the divine law of adjustment lead you into new light and understanding. I love this phrase, the divine law of adjustment. I've never seen that anywhere else. Now, sometimes it feels like that, yeah, right? The divine law of adjustment. Oh, get me out of here, rescue me. I don't want this. Take it away.
I don't know.
But it's really more like that. Right?
Aww.
The divine law of adjustment. We have people around us. We have people who know us, people who care for us. People can help us in our adjustment. We all go, is anyone in this room not been confronted by the divine law of adjustment? It happens all the time, right? The divine law of adjustment, shifting our lives, moving into something different, into something new. And that in-between spot can be very uncomfortable. It can feel like a cave for a while, until we remember it doesn't have to be a cave. We can make that choice. Life is a flowing process, and every person is a specialized channel for that flow. Each and every one of us has that job to be what?
A specialized.
To be us. Yeah. What did you say about
Who we are.
Yeah, who we are. That's our job. Each and every one of us. The important thing is a commitment to grow onward rather than grow old. And he uses that phrase a lot. To grow onward. Grow onward. What's next for me? What's next for me? Is it something completely different than I ever might have imagined? Am I willing to open myself up to something that's totally different? What's next for me? He also uses this little two-word phrase a lot, walk on. You know, I've heard them use that with the Clydesdales, with the big horses in the field, right? That's the walk on, walk on, walk on. And there are a few of these little things that we can remember. Just that phrase, walk on. The divine law of adjustment. Grow onward. That if we can take a few of those and just kind of lodge them, stick it in your back pocket. So next time you're in that what feels like a cave, walk on. Put one foot in front of the other. Walk on until you find that glimmer. So we may not all be college bound. In fact, I don't think there's anyone here who's college bound right now. But we still can ask ourselves this question. How would you like to spend the next 4 years? Right? Imagine that you were going to college and needing to ask yourself, what am I moving into? What am I walking on into? What am I going to study now? We can still ask ourselves that question. What's my next year about? What's my next 4 years about? Okay? And no matter what it feels like sometimes, holding on by your fingernails, life is actually lived in a series of progressions. And I love these circles and the back and forth, and sometimes you're going forward, and sometimes it feels like you're going backwards, and it just sort of keeps moving and keeps connecting. And that's what our lives are like. They don't go in straight lines, do they?
No.
They don't go in straight lines. We know that. Yet when we're stuck in a situation that's not a straight line, we can feel pretty forgotten, pretty lost, pretty confused. A series of progressions. It will move, and our job is to remember the divine law of adjustment and to walk on. And that way we can commence and commemorate.